At 13, I was left with a note stuck to the refrigerator. 15 years later, I read their names on the competitor list for the billion-dollar project. They thought I was still that same kid, starving for a piece of bread. But this time, I held the pen that awarded the contract. This is not a story about forgiveness. This is the day I take back everything they ever wanted. My name is Harper Lopez, from where I sit, 30 floors above Montera Bay. The world looks orderly. The lines of the container ships are clean. The water a predictable slate gray under the November sky. My office is all glass and recycled steel. The flagship of Whitlock Urban Works. I am, for all intents and purposes, the future CEO. The air inside is filtered, smelling faintly of citrus and server heat. Today is my birthday. I am 28. On the corner of my vast, reclaimed oak desk sits a single card. It's thick, expensive linen stock, embossed with the company logo. Happy birthday, Ms. Lopez. From Maya. Maya is my executive assistant. She is efficient, precise, and never forgets a date. It is the only card I received. I prefer it this way. Orderly. A draft snakes through the high-performance seals of the window. It is barely perceptible, just a whisper of cold, untreated air from the bay. It smells of salt and distant rain. It is enough. The polished steel vanishes. The view of Montera dissolves. The scent of citrus is replaced by something else. It is the smell of wet softwood, of mildew creeping into drywall, of dust motes dancing in the last gray light. I am not in Montera. I am in Redwood Harbor. The house in Redwood Harbor was not a house. It was a collection of damp boards fighting gravity. The ceiling in my room had a long, geographic crack that looked like a river delta. In the evenings, the shadows pooled in the corners, thick and gray. Long before the sun actually set, I was turning 13. I walked home from the middle school bus stop, kicking at the loose gravel, practicing the face I would make when I saw the cake, maybe chocolate, maybe even a few balloons. I had aced my algebra midterm, and I had convinced myself that this time, that would be enough. The house was silent. That was not unusual. Silence was their preferred method of communication. The air was cold, the space heaters unplugged. There was no cake on the counter. There was only a piece of yellow legal paper, torn hastily from a pad, stuck to the beige refrigerator with a weak magnet. Gone to visit friends. Back in a week. The handwriting was my mother's sloppy cursive, leaning so far forward it looked like it was falling over. No name, no number, just friends. I opened the refrigerator. The little light inside flickered, then held. Half a carton of milk, already smelling sour. A plastic-wrapped heel of white bread, dry at the edges. A single, wrinkled apple in the crisper. No card, no gift. Not even a stale cupcake. My first thought was not sadness. It was cold, sharp-edged fear. Not fear of being alone, fear of being found alone. I knew what happened to kids who were found alone. They went into the system. They were taken to places with locked doors and linoleum floors. So, I started acting. The next morning, I got up for school. I made my face look normal. I brushed my hair until my scalp stung. At school, I was quiet, but not too quiet. I turned in my homework. I answered when called on. When Jessica Riley asked why I was not having a party, I shrugged and said we were doing something just family on the weekend. The lie tasted like copper in my mouth. After school, I did my chores. The house was already cold, but I did not turn on the heat. That cost money. I realized my school uniform was dirty. I took my polo shirt and my one pair of jeans into the bathroom and washed them in the basin with a sliver of soap. The water was icy. It turned my hands bright red, stinging them raw. I wrung them out, the muscles in my forearms burning, and hung them over the shower rod. They were still damp and stiff the next morning, smelling like cold tap water. By day 3, the apple was gone. The milk was undrinkable. By day 4, I had finished the dry bread, chewing each bite until it turned to paste. The hunger started as a dull ache, something I could ignore. By day 5, it was a hollow, demanding thing. It twisted in my stomach. I searched the house. I looked under their bed, in the closets, in the rusted coffee can where they sometimes tossed change. I found nothing but dust bunnies and old receipts. I went through the pockets of my old coats. My fingers brushed against metal. I pulled out a handful of coins, 1 quarter, 3 dimes, 4 nickels, and 7 pennies, 82 cents. I walked the mile to the corner store. The bell tinkled when I entered. I kept my head down, avoiding the clerk's eyes. I went to the day-old rack. There was 1 loaf of store-brand white bread, the end crushed in. The tag said 99 cents. I did not have enough. I stood there for a full minute, the plastic crinkling in my hand. "You short?" the clerk asked. He was an older man. Tired. I nodded, unable to speak, my throat tight with shame. He sighed. "Just take it. Do not make a mess." I did not run. I walked out, my back rigid, waiting to be called a thief. He said nothing. I ate 2 slices right there on the curb. The bread tasting like cotton and salvation. A week. The note said a week. That was day 7, a Saturday. I had not gone outside. I had saved the last 2 slices of bread. The sun went down. The gray shadows in the living room turned black. I sat on the floor by the front window, my knees pulled to my chest, watching the empty gravel road. The wall clock ticked. It was an ugly plastic thing, shaped like a sunburst, but its sound was deafening in the silence. Tick, tock, tick, tock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. Every time the wind rustled the trees, my heart leaped. I would strain my ears, listening for the sound of the engine, the crunch of tires on gravel, the slam of a car door. There was only the wind. 11 o'clock. The clock ticked. The house grew colder. And then, I knew. It was not a sudden flash. It was a slow, cold tide rising inside me. They were not visiting friends. They were not delayed by traffic. They were not coming back. The note was not a promise. It was an escape plan. They did not just go somewhere. They left me. I did not cry. I was too empty, too cold. I just sat there and watched the road until the black sky turned a bruised, sickly purple. The morning was heavy with fog. Redwood Harbor fog. It clung to everything, making the world small and silent. I put on my stiff, damp jeans and my cleanest shirt. I put my toothbrush and the sliver of soap into my school backpack. I had no money. I had no plan. I just knew I could not stay. My stomach was a tight, painful knot. My eyes were swollen and gritty from staring into the dark. I walked out the front door. I did not lock it. There was nothing left to steal. I walked toward the old quarry bus stop. It was 3 miles. The fog was so thick I could barely see the shoulder of the road. I just kept putting one foot in front of the other. I reached the stop. It was just a weathered bench and a faded sign. I sat down, my backpack in my lap. The fog muffled all sound. I felt invisible. I do not know how long I sat there. An hour, maybe 2. A vehicle slowed, its headlights cutting weakly through the mist. It was not a bus. It was an old silver pickup truck, clean but dented. It pulled onto the gravel shoulder and stopped. I tensed, my hand gripping the strap of my backpack. The passenger door opened. A man got out. He was not tall, but he seemed solid. He had salt and pepper hair, cut short, and a face weathered by the sun, not by anger. He did not approach me like a threat. He walked slowly, stopping about 10 feet away. He crouched down, putting himself on my level. His eyes were clear blue, and they looked at me, really looked at me, not through me. He did not ask if I was okay. He did not ask if I was lost. He just asked, his voice calm and low. "What's your name?" "Harper," I whispered. My voice was a dry rasp. "Harper Lopez." He nodded, slowly. "I'm Graham Whitlock. I was just stopping for gas." He looked at my thin jacket, soaked with fog, and then at the bus stop sign. He seemed to make a decision. He reached into the pocket of his own sturdy canvas jacket and pulled out a thick chocolate bar, the kind with almonds. "You look like you could use this," he said. It was not a question. He tossed it to me. My reflexes were slow. but I caught it. My fingers fumbled with the wrapper. I did not wait. I ate the entire bar, the rich, sweet chocolate almost painful as it hit my empty stomach. It was the best thing I had ever tasted. Graham Whitlock waited. He did not rush me. He just leaned against his truck, arms crossed, until I had finished the last bite and licked the foil wrapper clean. Only then did he ask the question, his voice quiet but firm. "Where are your parents?" "Harper." The question hung in the fog. I looked down at the empty wrapper in my hand. "They left," I said. "7 days ago, from Redwood Harbor." "Redwood Harbor," he repeated, his brow furrowing. "Who are your parents? What are their names?" "Victor," I said. "Victor and Marla Hale." The name hit him like a physical blow. He froze. The calm, weathered expression on his face hardened, just for a second, into something I could not read, anger, or maybe recognition. He stood up straight. "Victor Hale," he said, not as a question, but as a confirmation. "He is my brother." He explained it on the drive. He was my father's younger brother. They had not spoken in almost 2 decades. There was a fight, long before I was born, over their own father's will, a dispute about property, about a small parcel of land that Victor believed was his. Victor had taken his share, changed his last name to Hale, our mother's name, and cut off the entire Whitlock family. Graham had not seen him since. He had no idea Victor even had a child. He did not take me to his home. Not at first. He took me to the police station in the next county. He did not speak to me in the waiting room. He just got me a cup of hot tea from a machine. I watched through the blinds as he spoke to an officer, his hands moving calmly, decisively. He made calls. He spoke to a lawyer. He spoke to social services. I heard bits of the conversation. "She is my blood. I am taking full custody. It is not negotiable. Keep her out of the system." He bought me a new set of clothes from a department store, jeans, a thick sweater, and new shoes. He told me to throw the old ones in a dumpster behind the store. He did not want me to bring the smell of that house with me. By the time the sun set, we were driving south along the coast. The fog had burned off, revealing a sharp, dramatic coastline where the mountains plunged into the Pacific. We drove into a town called Seacliff by the Bay. It was nothing like Redwood Harbor. The houses were not damp shacks. They were solid, built of gray stone and old-growth timber, with red tile roofs. We pulled into the driveway of a house that looked like it had grown from the cliffside. It smelled of pine from the fireplace and old books. "This is your home now," he said, setting my new backpack inside the door. "There are rules. You will follow them." That night, I slept in a real bed, under a heavy quilt. I did not dream. The next morning, I woke to the smell of frying eggs. Graham was in the kitchen, dressed in the same practical canvas pants. He placed a plate in front of me, 2 fried eggs, toast, and bacon. It was more food than I had seen in a week. As I ate, he slid something else across the polished wood table. It was an old leather ledger, the pages thick and yellowed. "This was my first ledger," he said. "Now it's yours. I am giving you an allowance. You will write down everything you spend, every gum wrapper, every pencil, every single cent." I must have looked confused. "You manage your money, you manage your life," he said, sipping his black coffee. "Waste nothing. Respect every penny. It is a record of your decisions." That Saturday, he took me to the local farmer's market. He gave me $20. "We need vegetables for the week," he said. "Do not come back with change unless you have a good reason." I watched him. He never grabbed the first thing he saw. He talked to the farmers. He inspected the produce. At one stall, he picked up a head of lettuce. "This one has brown spots," he said to the vendor, his voice polite. "I will give you half price for it." The vendor started to argue, but Graham just held his gaze, calm and steady. The vendor sighed and took the money. "Negotiating is not about cheating someone," he taught me, as we walked away. "It is about knowing the true value of a thing. Saving $1 is respecting your own sweat. Never be ashamed to ask for what is fair." His lessons were never long. They were short, dense, and practical. Most evenings, we sat by the fire. The house was quiet, filled with the sound of the logs cracking and the distant ocean. He would tell me stories, not about himself, but about the Whitlock family. He told me about our great-grandfather, a stonemason who built small, perfect bridges over the creeks in Seacliff. He used to say that strength is not in the wallet, Graham told me, staring into the flames. It is in how you stand tall when no one is watching. It is about building things that last longer than you do. I started at Seacliff High 3 weeks later. I was the new girl, the charity case, the girl with no history. I was quiet, I was timid, but I had the ledger, I had the routine. I poured everything into my schoolwork. It was a system with clear rules. Effort in, grades out. It was reliable. It was not like a promise written on a yellow scrap of paper. I stopped being the timid girl. I became the excellent girl. I joined the math team. I joined the debate club. My teachers began to rely on me. I was the one they trusted to manage the projects, to balance the budgets for the school events. I stood tall. My weekends were not spent at the mall. They were spent at Whitlock Urban Works. The headquarters was not a steel tower then. It was a sprawling timber building, smelling of sawdust and drafting ink. Graham would take me through the yards, pointing out the different grades of reclaimed lumber, the new composites they were testing. The first time he brought me into the main drafting room. The engineers looked up, curious. Graham put a heavy hand on my shoulder. "This is my niece, Harper," he announced to the room. "She is the future of this company." A few of them smiled politely, but Graham was not joking. He sat me down at an empty drafting table. He unrolled a blueprint. "This is a bridge," he said. "It does not just move cars. It connects a community. But it has to be safe, it has to be efficient, and it has to last." He taught me how to read the drawings. He taught me how to do cost estimates, calculating the load-bearing capacity of a steel beam versus the environmental impact of its production. I learned the language of tensile strength, of soil composites, of sustainable drainage systems. I did not just learn it, I consumed it. This was not an empty house. This was not a broken promise. This was concrete. This was steel. This was a system of rules that, if you followed them, built something real. A passion started to grow in me, a quiet, fierce dedication to this work, to building cities that were smart, that were green, that did not waste, that did not abandon. Graham saw it. "Good," he would grunt, reviewing my cost sheets. "But you missed the inflation adjustment on the sealant. Check it again." I was 13, 14, 15. I was no longer the girl at the bus stop. I was a Whitlock. I was being built, piece by piece, just like one of my uncle's bridges. The foundation of my life at Seacliff was built on Graham's simple, unyielding principles: work, honesty, respect for the materials. For 3 years. I absorbed these lessons. I was 16, then 17. I was no longer the girl from the fog, waiting for a bus. I was the captain of the Seacliff High debate team, and I knew the load-bearing capacity of A36 steel. The house was stable. Graham was predictable. I was safe. And then, Jasper came home. I knew him only from photographs in the upstairs hallway. Graham's son, 3 years older than me, perpetually smiling on a ski slope or at the helm of a boat. He had been exiled to a prestigious prep school back east, one that cost more per year than the entire operating budget for the Redwood Harbor School District. His return was not a reunion. It was an arrival. A low-slung, cherry-red sports car I did not recognize snarled up the gravel driveway, spitting stones against the house. He walked in not like a son returning, but like an owner inspecting a property he had forgotten he owned. He was tall, with Graham's strong jawline, but where Graham's features were weathered by work and sun, Jasper's were smooth and arrogant. He wore a pale blue suit that looked ridiculous for a Tuesday afternoon and smelled strongly of expensive cologne. He dropped a sleek leather duffel bag on the polished floor. Graham came out of his study, a rare, wide smile on his face. "Jasper," You're home. Yeah, Dad. Made it. Jasper's eyes scanned the familiar room, then landed on me. I was sitting at the dining table, my physics homework spread out next to a cost analysis spreadsheet for a local sidewalk repair project. His smile did not just fade, it curdled. He looked me up and down, a slow, dismissive appraisal that made my skin crawl. It was the look of someone finding a stray cat sleeping on his favorite chair. Well, he said, his voice smooth and bored. Who did you pick up from the pound, Dad? The air in the room went still and cold. Graham's smile vanished, snapped off like a dry twig. Jasper, this is Harper Lopez, my niece, your cousin. She lives here. Jasper let out a short, sharp laugh. Niece since when? From the brother who stole from you, the one who ran off. I did not move. I did not look up from my spreadsheet. I could feel the heat rising in my neck, the old, familiar shame washing over me. I stared at the numbers. Stand tall when no one is watching. I forced my hand to stop shaking, my pencil to remain steady on the column. She lives here, Graham repeated, his voice dropping an octave, losing its warmth and gaining the hard edge I knew from the worksite. And you will treat her with respect. Whatever you say, Jasper shrugged, affecting boredom as he picked up his bag. Just keep her away from my stuff. I do not want to catch anything. The tension settled into the house like damp. Jasper's presence was an oil slick on clean water. He slept until noon, took his car out at all hours of the night, and treated the house like a high-end hotel, leaving towels on the floor and half-empty glasses in the living room. Graham watched this display of casual entitlement for exactly 1 week. The following Monday, at breakfast, Graham put down his coffee cup with a decisive click. Jasper, you're finished with school for now. Harper, you're on summer break. It is time. You will both apprentice at the company. Jasper, who had been scrolling on his phone, looked up, appalled. Apprentice, Dad. I'm not going to pour concrete. I'm going to manage the investments, the portfolio. That is what we talked about. You will manage nothing until you understand what you are managing, Graham said, his voice flat and final. You will learn the business from the ground up, both of you. 8 a.m. tomorrow. Be in my office, dressed for work. Jasper scoffed, a look of profound disbelief on his face, but he saw the set of his father's jaw and did not argue further. The next morning, I was in Graham's office at 7:45. I wore my new steel-toed boots, clean jeans, and a high-visibility vest. I had my new leather ledger for work notes and 3 sharpened pencils. Jasper rolled in at 8:30. He was wearing an Italian suit of charcoal gray and sleek, black loafers, no socks. Graham looked at Jasper's shoes, then at his face. He did not raise his voice. You will ruin the leather. Go home. Change. You are docked half a day's pay. Jasper came back an hour later, his face thunderous, wearing the most expensive, brand-new work boots I had ever seen. They did not have a single scuff on them. Graham sent me with Mike, the senior site foreman. She's not your niece out there, Mike, Graham said, loud enough for us both to hear. She's an apprentice. She sweeps, she carries, she learns. If she's late, you send her home. If she's lazy, you send her home. Yes, sir, Mike nodded, giving me a tough, appraising look. I spent that summer in the dust and the sun. I started by sweeping rebar shavings and organizing bolts. I learned how to read survey stakes. I checked invoices against packing slips, making sure the grade of aggregate we ordered was the grade that was delivered. I sat in the mandatory safety meetings, learning the precise angle a trench box must be placed at to prevent a catastrophic collapse. It was hard. Physical work. My muscles ached in new places every night. I got sunburned on my neck, but it was real. It was tangible. I could see the results of my work at the end of every day. Jasper was assigned to the main office trailer. He sat at a clean desk, theoretically reviewing material procurement orders and logistics schedules. I would walk past the air-conditioned trailer, sweaty and covered in grime, and see him through the window, feet up on the desk, laughing into his phone, scrolling. He was always scrolling, When I came in to log my hours, I would hear the whispers from the other office staff. "He took a 2-hour lunch," one of the receptionists would murmur to the accountant. "He asked me to get his car detailed." The intern muttered. I heard him once, talking loudly to a friend on his phone, the door to his office wide open. "Yeah, I'm just babysitting the old man's company for the summer. It's a total drag. And he's got this stray he picked up, following him around like a puppy, polished her up a bit, thinks she's an heir now. It's pathetic. She's just a polished-up stray, trying to get her hooks into the money." I stood just outside the door, my hand covered in grease from a bearing inspection I'd been helping with. The blood drained from my face. I did not knock. I did not confront him. I just turned, walked back out into the blistering heat of the work site, and asked Mike to show me how to read the hydraulic schematic for the new excavator. The company was bidding on a project to replace 3 small canal bridges for the city. It was a good municipal contract, steady work. Graham, as he always did, brought the blueprints home and spread them on the dinner table. "The margins are thin," he said, rubbing his chin. "The city wants durability, but the budget is tight. We need an edge." Jasper glanced at them. "Just use the standard composite beams. Bid low. Get it done. Move on. It's a boring project." I had been studying the soil reports from the site visit. "We cannot," I said quietly. Jasper glared at me, annoyed at the interruption. "Excuse me. The soil is too saturated. The alkalinity is high. The standard composite will swell and degrade inside of 10 years. We will lose our entire profit margin on the warranty repairs." Graham looked at me, his eyes sharp, raising an eyebrow. "Go on." I felt a surge of confidence. This was not an opinion. This was data. "I was looking at the materials from the shipyard demolition we cleared last quarter," I said, pulling out my own ledger, filled with notes. "We have access to a surplus of high-grade, treated timber beams. If we reinforce them with a recycled steel core, which we also have in surplus from the same job, we can change the structural design." I slid my sketches across the table. I had been working on them for a week. "We can use an arched support instead of a flat beam. It is stronger. It uses our existing surplus inventory, and it will last 50 years, not 15. The timber is resistant to the soil's pH." I pointed to the last page. I had already run the numbers, just as he had taught me. "It will save 7% on the total material cost," I said, my voice steady. "And it increases the lifespan by, conservatively, 30%. We can include that in the bid. That is our edge." Graham studied my drawings. He studied my math. A slow, genuine smile spread across his face. "Well, I will be damned." Jasper stared at me. His face was pale. He looked exposed. He had been dismissed, and I had been validated. In the language his father respected numbers and materials. "We rebid tomorrow morning," Graham said, tapping my drawings. "Good work. Harper, this is good work." We won the bid. The canal bridge was my project. I was 17, and I was assistant managing a municipal project. Reporting directly to Mike, Jasper was assigned to assist me with the document flow. Things started to go wrong. Small things. At first, the wrong gravel aggregate was delivered. A grade too fine for the load we needed. An order for 16mm rebar came in as 12mm. I caught the errors, but they cost us time. I chalked it up to supply chain mistakes. Then, the big one happened. The engineering sub-firm called me, and the partner was furious. "What is this, Harper? You sent us blueprint revisions for the abutments. We poured the footings based on the specs you approved last week. This new spec requires a wider, deeper base. We have to tear them out. This is a disaster." "What revision?" I said, my stomach turning to ice. "I did not send any revision. The one you sent yesterday, stamped and approved by you." I ran to the document trailer. I pulled the file. Sure enough, there was a blueprint revision, faxed and emailed to the engineers. It had my approval initials forged in the corner. It was an older draft, one I had specifically rejected 3 weeks prior because the load calculations were wrong, It was sabotage. It delayed the project by 2 weeks and cost us $40,000 to fix. Graham called me, Jasper, and Mike into his office. He did not yell. He was terrifyingly quiet. "Explain this," he said, placing the incorrect drawing on his desk. Mike looked at me, his face tight with disappointment. "The paperwork came from her. Mr. Whitlock, the chain of custody is clear. It came from this office." I looked at the forged initials. "That is not my signature. It looks like it, but I did not approve this. I rejected this draft weeks ago." Jasper leaned against the wall, arms crossed, a small, sympathetic smirk on his face. "It is okay. Harper, we all get in over our heads. It is a lot of pressure. Maybe you should stick to filing for a while." I looked at him, at his clean hands, at his perfectly pressed shirt. "You did this," I said. "Whoa," Jasper said, holding up his hands in mock surrender. "Blaming others is not a good look. Dad, she is stressed. She messed up. It happens." "I did not," I said, my voice shaking, but low and fierce. "This was the draft from 3 weeks ago, the one you said you shredded because the specs were wrong. How did it get from the shredder into the approved box?" Jasper's smirk wavered. His eyes darted to his father. Graham looked from me to his son. He saw the truth in an instant. "Jasper," Graham said, his voice like rolling gravel. "My office, now." He turned to me. "Harper, go fix the site. I will handle this." I did not hear the argument. I was at the canal, coordinating the demolition of the new footings, the sound of the jackhammers drowning out everything else. But I heard Graham's voice later that evening, when I was in the kitchen, washing concrete dust off my face. He was in his study with Jasper, and the door was closed, but the anger radiated through the wood. "You could have killed someone," Graham's voice boomed, rattling the doorframe. "That specification was unsafe. You did not just delay a project, you endangered the crew. All for what? Because you were embarrassed." "She thinks she is better than me," Jasper shouted back, his voice cracking with a petulance I had never heard. "She's nobody. She's trash. And you look at her like she is, while I am your son, your blood." "Labor is the root, Jasper," Graham said, his voice suddenly very tired, drained of its anger. "I have told you that your whole life you will not inherit what you have not earned. You will not destroy what others have built. You are suspended from the site, indefinitely." The study door slammed open. Jasper stormed out. He saw me by the sink, my hands red from scrubbing. His face was a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. He did not say a word. He just walked out of the house, got in his ridiculous car, and peeled out of the driveway, spraying gravel again. That night, the dinner was silent. Graham just stared at his plate, the food untouched. The only sound in that big, beautiful house was the heavy, silver cutlery scraping almost silently against the ceramic plates. It was the sound of a new crack forming in the foundation of the home. I knew Jasper would be back, and I knew this was not over. I chose to be quiet. I did not want to cause Graham any more pain. I did not want to risk the only home I had ever known. But I did not forget. I went up to my room. I took out my financial ledger, and I took out a new one, a blank one. I opened the new ledger. On the first page, I wrote the date. I wrote Canal Bridge number 1, sabotage, draft substitution. I detailed the time, the cost of the delay $40,000 and the forged initials. I noted the supplier discrepancy from the week before, linking it to Jasper's office extension. I documented everything. I was not just learning how to build bridges. I was learning how to build a case. The seed of Jasper's resentment was planted, but I was the one who was quietly watering my own. I would stand tall. I would respect the work, and I would remember the value of every single cent he cost us. The aftermath of the Canal Bridge sabotage was quiet, but decisive. Jasper was gone, sent back east to finish his business degree, a solution Graham had brokered to avoid public shame. I finished high school at the top of my class. I was accepted to Stanford. My application filled with essays on sustainable urban materials and essays on structural integrity. I moved to Palo Alto, but my life remained in Seacliff. I came home every weekend. I was not just a niece visiting, I was Graham's partner. We spent Saturday nights not at dinners, but in his study, reviewing bids, arguing over the merits of green roofing versus solar panel arrays. I was 20 years old, studying advanced engineering, and I was, in all but name, the co-manager of Whitlock Urban Works. The company was growing. We were stable. We were sound. Then it started. It was not a dramatic event. It was a sound. A cough. At first, it was just a dry tick in his throat, a roughness he would clear after a long day of walking the sites. But the cough did not go away. It lingered through the summer. By fall, it had become a persistent, dry scraping, as if something inside his chest was rusty and trying to move. He dismissed it. Sight dust, he would grunt, waving away my concern. But by winter, the cough had teeth. It would seize him, doubling him over, leaving him breathless and red-faced. I drove him to a specialist in San Francisco. I sat in the silent, expensive waiting room, my textbook on advanced material composites open on my lap, though I was not reading. When he came out, his face was the same as it always was, weathered, calm, unreadable, but his eyes were different. They were distant. He got in the truck and sat for a full minute, staring at the cityscape. "Well," he said, his voice flat, "it seems my lungs are turning to stone." The diagnosis was chronic interstitial pulmonary fibrosis, a disease, the doctor explained, born from decades of breathing, decades of silica dust from concrete, of microscopic particles from sawdust, of fibers I had never heard of. His lungs, the bellows that had powered him for 60 years, were scarring themselves. They were becoming stiff, inelastic, old leather. They were forgetting how to breathe. The house on the cliff began to change. The scent of pine and old books was soon overlaid with the sterile tang of rubbing alcohol and prescription bottles. First came the pills, lined up on the kitchen counter in a weekly organizer. Then came the nebulizer, a machine that hissed medicated steam into his lungs every evening. He would sit by the fire, the mask over his face, his eyes closed, and I would pretend to read my textbooks, the sound of the machine grinding against the sound of the ocean. I moved my classes to a commuter schedule, driving the coast road 3 days a week. My life became a ledger of 2 columns, my senior thesis, and my uncle's decline. Then the oxygen tanks arrived. They were heavy, green steel cylinders. I felt the foundation of my world tilt. With the tanks came the tubing, thin, clear plastic. It snaked from the humming concentrator, looped over his ears, and settled against his sun-scorched, weathered cheeks. A man who built bridges, who wrestled steel girders into place, who was, to me, the very definition of strength, was now tethered to a wall by a plastic cord. He hated it. He hated the weakness of it, the visible admission of failure, but he hated the feeling of suffocation more. I became his nurse. It was a role I took on as I had taken on everything else with methodical precision. I learned to read the pulse oximeter, the small red light that clipped to his finger. 94%, good. 92, time to sit down. 90, turn up the tank. Below 88. My hand went to the phone. I managed his steroids, his antifibrotics. I managed his physical therapy, mild exercises to maximize what little lung capacity remained. I was balancing equations for structural load while simultaneously calculating his respiratory rate. Both were systems under stress. Both, I knew, could fail. Jasper came to visit, once, maybe twice. He was working in the city now, burning through his mother's inheritance, trying to style himself as some kind of venture capitalist. He would pull up in a new, leased luxury car, stride into the house, and his eyes would slide right past the oxygen tubing, the nebulizer, the exhaustion on his father's face. "Hey, Dad, looking good," he would say, his voice too loud, too bright. He would pat Graham's shoulder, a hollow gesture. "Listen, I am just swamped. This new fund is explosive. I cannot stay long. Just wanted to show my face. He would look at his watch. Always. He would look at his watch. Busy, he would say, already backing toward the door. So busy. He never once asked me about the medication schedule. He never asked what the SpO2 reading was. He just fled. The sight of his father's weakness, his father's mortality, was an inconvenience. The nights were the worst. Winter returned to Seacliff, and the wind off the Pacific was a physical force, rattling the thick panes of glass. But the sound of the ocean was drowned out by the sound from his bedroom, the sound of him breathing. It was a wet, ragged sound, a terrible, labored scraping. He would be seized by coughing fits, deep, agonizing spasms that left him gasping, his face pale and slick with sweat. I would hear him through the wall, and I would be out of my bed in an instant. The digital clock would read 3:05 a.m. I would find him sitting on the edge of the bed, fighting. Pillows, he would gasp. I would stack them behind him, propping him up. I would check the tubes for kinks. I would hold a cup of water to his lips, his hand, still impossibly strong, gripping my arm. "It is all right, Graham," I would whisper, my heart hammering with a cold fear I had not felt since I was 13. "It is just the wind. Just breathe." I was terrified of that cough. I was terrified it would be the one that finally tore the scarred tissue for good. One night, the coughing did not stop. It was a storm. I clipped the oximeter to his finger. The red numbers flashed. 88, 86, 85. Call 911, he choked out. The ambulance was 25 minutes away. Too long. "I am driving you," I said, my voice calm, the way he had taught me to be. "We are going now." I got him into his canvas jacket, maneuvered the heavy portable tank into the pickup truck, and half-carried him into the passenger seat. I drove fast. The coast road was dark, the tires screaming on the curves. He was fighting for every single breath. His eyes squeezed shut. Halfway to the hospital, he reached over and his hand clamped down on my arm. "Harper." His voice was a razor-thin whisper. "Graham, just breathe. We are almost there." "No, listen," he gasped, pulling air from the cannula. The charter? The Whitlock charter? It is in the safe. We will talk about it later," I pleaded, my eyes blurring. "No, listen." His grip tightened. "My great-grandfather. He wrote it. The company. It does not go to blood. It goes to labor." He coughed. A terrible, deep sound. "It goes," he wheezed, "to whoever is worthy. Whoever earns it." I glanced at him. His face was gray in the dashboard light, but his eyes were wide open, clear and fierce. "You earned it. Harper, you stood tall, when no one was watching." He survived that night. He survived for 3 more months. He was weaker. He never left the house again. But he was still Graham. Then one morning in early April, I woke up to silence. It was not the peaceful silence of the house. It was a profound, empty silence. The hiss of the oxygen concentrator had stopped. The ragged breathing was gone. I walked to his room. The sun was just rising over the bay, filling the room with a soft, pink light. He was propped up on his pillows, his head turned toward the window, as if he was watching the sunrise. The cannula was still resting on his cheek. The oximeter was still on his finger. But the red light was off. I walked to the bed. I did not need to check, but I did. I put my fingers on his neck. I touched his hand. It was not cold. It was just still. The warmth had left it. I did not cry. I did not scream. I stood there for a moment, looking at his face. The lines of pain were gone. He looked peaceful. I picked up the phone. I dialed 911. I reported the time. I gave the facts. I was methodical. I was my uncle's apprentice, to the very end. The funeral was brief, held on the cliffside. It was what he had written down. His ashes were given to the wind, scattering over the Pacific. I stood there, my black jacket snapping in the wind. My grief was not loud. It was a heavy, solid thing, a new foundation of concrete settling in my chest. Jasper stood far back, near his car, his face hidden behind expensive black sunglasses. He checked his phone twice during my eulogy. A week later, we sat in the sterile, glass-walled conference room of Mr. Davies, Graham's attorney. It was just me, Jasper, and the lawyer. Jasper tapped his foot impatiently. He was calculating his inheritance. Mr. Davies put on his reading glasses and opened the thick document. He read through the preamble, the legal language. There were small bequests to his longtime housekeeper, to Mike, the site foreman. Then, Mr. Davies cleared his throat. As to the remainder of my estate, he read, his voice neutral, including all properties real and personal, all liquid assets, and my 100% controlling interest in Whitlock Urban Works, I bequeath, in its entirety, to my beloved niece, Harper Lopez. The silence in the room was absolute. It was louder than the wind on the cliff. Jasper just stared. His face went from its usual impatient tan to a chalky white, then to a deep, mottled red. "What?" he whispered. Then he erupted. He shot to his feet, slamming both hands on the polished table. "Fake!" he roared, his voice cracking. "That is a lie. He was sick. He was on drugs. She manipulated him, that stray. She tricked him. I did not move. I did not look at him. I continued to look at Mr. Davies." The lawyer calmly took off his glasses and placed them on the table. "Mr. Whitlock," he said, his voice cutting through the rage like a diamond drill. "This will was executed 2 years ago, long before your father's health declined." He slid a notarized document across the table. "I was present, a notary was present, and we had a physician certify that your father was," and I quote, "in exceptionally sound mind and body. It is ironclad." Jasper stared at the document, his mouth opening and closing. The rage collapsed, replaced by a pure, toxic humiliation. He was disinherited. He was, in his father's final, binding words, found unworthy. He pointed a trembling finger at me. His face was a mask of hatred. "You will not get away with this." He grabbed his suit jacket, tore open the glass door, and stormed out of the office. An hour later, an email hit the company inbox. It was from Jasper. It contained a single sentence. "I resign, effective immediately." He was gone. He took his entitlement, his shame, and a hatred so deep it was almost a physical thing. I was 22 years old. I was finishing my final exams at Stanford, and I was the sole owner of Whitlock Urban Works. I sat in Graham's chair, in his empty, silent house, and felt the true weight of his legacy settle onto my shoulders. I walked into the timber headquarters of Whitlock Urban Works, not as an apprentice, but as the owner. I was 22 years old. The senior vice presidents, men who had known me since I was a teenager in steel-toed boots, now reported to me. They saw a girl. They saw an anomaly, a fluke in a will. I saw a company that had grown stagnant, loyal to a fault, and vulnerable. Graham's strength was his integrity, but his weakness was his loyalty. He had kept men on his executive team who had stopped innovating a decade ago. They were comfortable. They were a structural liability. My first 3 months as president and CEO were a quiet, systematic purge. I did not yell. I did not make speeches. I used the ledgers. Sal, the VP of operations, had been with Graham for 30 years. He had also been running a side business using our suppliers, skimming a small, polite percentage for himself for at least 5 of those years. Graham knew. He tolerated it as the cost of loyalty. I did not. I called Sal into Graham's old office. I had already moved the heavy oak desk to face the window. I preferred to see the bay. "Sal," I said, sliding a single spreadsheet across the polished wood. "These are the invoices from our aggregate supplier for the last 4 quarters, and these," I slid another paper, "are the market rate quotes for the same material. The discrepancy is 18%. Your consulting fee, I believe. He turned pale. Now, Harper, your uncle and I had an understanding. My uncle is gone, I said, my voice calm. His understanding died with him. You have 1 hour to clear your desk. We will not be pressing charges, but your severance is, of course, 0. He was the first. He was not the last. I facilitated the retirement of 4 senior managers, all of whom represented the old, comfortable way of doing business. I broke contracts with suppliers who had relied on handshakes instead of performance metrics. I replaced them with the young and the hungry. I hired a data scientist, barely 26, to run our logistics. I brought in an engineering team from Germany to redesign our entire approach to materials. I changed the mission statement. We were no longer just builders. We were regenerative urbanists. I poured our capital into research, green concrete, using fly ash and recycled slag, integrated solar roofing, closed-loop gray water systems. The old Whitlock built things to last. The new Whitlock would build things that healed. The industry saw me as a child, a radical, playing with her inheritance. They were waiting for me to fail. The first major attack came 6 months in. We were bidding on a large municipal tech campus, a flagship project for the New City Initiative. It was the perfect test for our new green concrete. We spent 2 months designing a bid that was revolutionary, carbon neutral, self-sustaining, and beautiful. We submitted it. The bid was sealed. 1 week later, I received a call from a city council member who had respected Graham. "Harper," he said, his voice low, "you have a serious problem. A new firm, a shell called Ridgeview Development, submitted a proposal just before the deadline. Their technical specs are, well, they are 90% identical to yours." I felt the blood drain from my face. It was the canal bridge. This was the same play. Just on a corporate scale, we had a leak. Before I could even begin an internal investigation, the media hit. It was a coordinated strike. The Montero Ledger, a paper that had revered Graham, ran a front-page story. The headline was explosive. "Whitlock works in crisis, shady international transfers raise red flags." The article, citing anonymous sources close to the company, alleged that Whitlock Urban Works was engaging in suspicious international wire transfers to offshore accounts. It painted a picture of a young, inexperienced CEO laundering her inheritance. It was a lie, but it was a masterful one. It did not accuse. It raised questions. Within 24 hours, our primary credit line was under review. Our investors were panicking. This was not sabotage. This was a war. I did not issue a denial. I did not panic. I followed the protocol. I got the data. I bypassed the police and hired the best digital forensics team in San Francisco. "Someone stole our bid," I told their team leader. "I want the entry point, the timestamp, and the IP address that received the data. And I want to know who is funding the Montero Ledger's new investigative reporter." They worked for 72 hours straight. They found it. The breach was not sophisticated. It was simple. The hacker had used the dormant executive account of Sal, the VP I had fired. He had never reset his remote access passwords. The data, our entire bid, had been downloaded, routed through a series of proxies in Eastern Europe, and delivered to a single, hard-coded IP address. "The IP is registered to a server in Ridgeview," the forensics lead told me, his face illuminated by the screen. Ridgeview, the same name as the competing firm. "Who are they?" I asked. My new head of logistics, the 26-year-old, ran the search. "Ridgeview Development is a shell corporation," she said, pulling up the state filings. "Registered 3 months ago, the capital funding, however, comes from a single private equity group." She projected the fund's management page onto the glass wall of my office. My breath caught. The managing partner, smiling in a crisp, expensive suit, was Jasper Whitlock. He had taken his mother's money, the inheritance he got from her side of the family, and built a weapon. But this was too clean. Jasper was an arrogant, lazy fool. He was not smart enough for a multi-pronged digital and media assault like this. He was the motive. He was the money. But he was not the architect. He was, I realized, just the gateway. I was preparing the legal case when the second attack came. This one was not digital. I had been working late, coordinating with our attorneys. It was past 10 at night when I left the headquarters. I got into Graham's old silver pickup truck. It was the only thing I had kept exactly as it was. I drove the coast road towards Seacliff. The road was empty, clinging to the cliffside, the ocean a black, roaring void to my right. There was no moon. I saw the headlights in my rearview mirror. A large, black sedan. It came up too fast. The light's high intensity, blinding me. It settled right on my bumper. Less than a foot away, I sped up, thinking it was a drunk. The sedan sped up, matching me. I tapped my brakes as a warning. The sedan accelerated, slamming into my rear bumper. The impact was a jolt, sending the truck fishtailing toward the guardrail. I wrestled the wheel, correcting the skid, my heart hammering against my ribs. This was not an accident. I saw the curve ahead, a sharp, hairpin turn. The sedan pulled alongside me, boxing me in against the cliff's edge. I glanced over. The windows were blacked out. I could not see the driver. The sedan swerved, deliberately, slamming its passenger side into my driver's side door. The sound of metal screaming was deafening. The truck's front wheel was knocked off the pavement, spinning over the void. I wrenched the wheel to the left, away from the drop, overcorrecting. The truck spun, skidding across the road, and slammed, broadside, into the solid rock face of the cliff on the inside of the curve. The world exploded. The airbag deployed with a violent, concussive bang. The cab filled with white smoke, the smell of burnt powder and hot metal. Then, silence, just the sound of the engine ticking, and the distant, mocking roar of the ocean below. The sedan was gone. It had not even slowed down. I was pinned. My chest was on fire. A sharp, stabbing pain every time I tried to breathe. I tasted blood. I unhooked my seatbelt and fell against the steering wheel. I was alive. When the highway patrol arrived, I was sitting on the cold asphalt, holding my side. I told them everything. It was deliberate. A black sedan. It forced me off the road. They found pieces of a shattered headlight and paint scrapings on my truck. They ran a partial plate. The plate was registered to a livery company, a small, barely solvent outfit called Nightline Transit. The police started their investigation. I started mine. My forensics team, now on retainer, dug into Nightline Transit. It was a shell, like Ridgeview, and its bills, its insurance, its lease payments all paid electronically from the same private equity fund that funded Ridgeview Development, all authorized by Jasper Whitlock. The police now had a direct financial link between a corporate espionage case and a vehicular assault. They had enough for a warrant. They did not raid his penthouse. They raided his storage unit, the one registered to the Nightline Transit Company. They found it all: burner phones, a laptop with encrypted files, and printouts. Printouts of my schedule, my routes home, even surveillance photos of me at the gym. They found the wire transfer authorizations to Nightline Transit. They found the unencrypted emails to a hacker for hire, detailing the payment structure for the Whitlock server breach. It was all him. He had been planning it for months. The leak, the smear, and the cliff. The trial was a formality. The evidence was overwhelming: digital, financial, and physical. I sat in the front row of the courtroom every day. My ribs were taped. It hurt to breathe. It hurt to sit. But I sat up straight. I stood tall. The jury found him guilty on all counts: corporate espionage, conspiracy to commit assault, vehicular assault with a deadly weapon. As the bailiffs cuffed him, his polished, venture capitalist facade finally shattered. He looked at me. His face was purple, his eyes bulging with a hatred so pure it was almost beautiful. "Thief!" he screamed, lunging against the bailiffs. "You stole it." "It was mine. You stole my house. You stole my name. You stole my life." He was still screaming as they dragged him from the courtroom. The company, however, was still in peril. The investors were terrified. Jasper's conviction proved I was attacked. But the media's questions about our finances were still hanging in the air. The day after the sentencing, I called a press conference. I held it in the main drafting room at headquarters. The smell of timber and sawdust in the air. The room was packed. The cameras and microphones were a wall of black foam and glass. I walked to the podium. I set down a single, heavy leather ledger. Graham's first ledger. "My name is Harper Lopez," I said, my voice clear and steady. "For the past 2 months, my company has been the victim of a coordinated criminal attack. That attack included corporate espionage, media manipulation, and an attempt on my life. The man responsible, my cousin, has been convicted." I looked directly into the main network camera. The press, fed by his lies, asked if Whitlock Urban Works was involved in shady international transfers. They asked if we were laundering money. These are valid questions. Today, you get valid answers. I motioned to the wall behind me. My logistics head hit the projector. "I am opening our books. I am making our corporate ledgers for the past 5 years public. Every invoice, every transfer, every single cent." The screen behind me lit up with our accounting software. "You will see the shady international transfers. They are payments to our sustainable bamboo supplier in Costa Rica. They are payments to our turbine engineering partners in Germany. Our books are clean. Our work is honest. We do not take shortcuts. We do not hide." I leaned forward. "We were attacked because we are changing this industry. We were attacked by a man who represents the old way entitlement, greed, and violence. He failed. My ribs will heal. My company is stronger than ever. Whitlock Urban Works is not in crisis. We are open for business. The Tech Campus bid is still active, and we expect to win it. Next question." The effect was immediate. It was not a denial. It was a counter-assault, waged with the one weapon Jasper had never understood: radical transparency. Our credit line was restored that afternoon. Our investors doubled down. The story was no longer about a company in crisis. It was about a CEO who had survived an attempted murder and opened her books to the world. I had won. I had fixed the structural flaw. I had stood tall. The 5 years after Jasper's conviction were not years of peace. They were years of relentless, methodical construction. I did not just rebuild Whitlock Urban Works. I reforged it. I graduated from Stanford with high honors. I moved from Graham's house on the cliff, which I kept as a monument, and into a sterile, glass-walled apartment in Montera. I was 28 years old, and my company was the recognized leader in sustainable engineering on the West Coast. We had grown by 200%. Our green concrete was no longer an experiment. It was the new standard. We built desalination plants powered by their own tidal energy. We built university campuses that were carbon negative, actually cleaning the air around them. I had built my fortress. I had honored Graham's legacy. I thought the war was over. Then, the state of Pacifica made the announcement. It was the project of the century, the Montera Eco-City. It was not just a development. It was a new model for human habitation, a multi-billion-dollar contract to build an entire city from the ground up. On the undeveloped coastal plains south of the bay, it was designed to be the most sustainable, technologically advanced urban center in the world. This was not just another contract. This was my life's work. This was the validation of every principle Graham had taught me, magnified 1,000 times. Every green water system, every recycled steel girder, every kilowatt of solar energy I had researched, this was the test. The bidding process was a gauntlet. It lasted 6 months, designed to weed out anyone who was not flawless. Round 1 financials. A consortium of banks reviewed our ledgers, our credit lines, our asset-to-debt ratio. We passed with the highest possible rating. Round 2 technical. We submitted over 4,000 pages of engineering data, material specs, and our proprietary energy return formulas. We were one of the 4 firms invited to the next round. Round 3 environmental impact and community review. This was where the pretenders died. We submitted our full life cycle analysis, our supply chain audits, our plans for native habitat restoration. The commission deliberated for a month. Finally, the email came. We were in the final. We were one of two. I was in my office, the glass wall overlooking the bay. The city was sharp and clear in the morning light. My assistant, Maya, the same efficient woman who left me a birthday card every year, walked in. She was the only person alive who knew my full, true history. I had told her myself, not as a confession, but as a necessary onboarding fact. She managed my life. She needed to know the liabilities. "Ms. Lopez," she said, her voice perfectly neutral. She placed a thick bound document on my desk. "The analysis of the finalist competitor is here." "Who is it?" I asked, not looking up from the wind turbine schematic on my screen. "A group I have not seen at this level before. Crestline Design Consortium." The name was vaguely familiar. I had heard whispers. They were new, aggressive. They came out of nowhere 2 or 3 years ago, underbidding everyone on mid-level commercial projects, building fast and cheap, and getting out. "Thank you, Maya," I said. I opened the file. The first few pages were their financials. They were heavily leveraged, but the capital was vast, flowing from a series of anonymous-looking equity funds. Their technical specs were average. Their designs were uninspired. Generic glass boxes. I flipped to the executive leadership page, and I stopped breathing. The polished, professional headshots stared back at me from the glossy page. They looked prosperous. They looked happy. Their hair, which I remembered as a dull brown and a faded blonde, was now a uniform, expensive silver. Their faces were smooth, their smiles practiced for boardrooms and golf courses. Victor Hale, Chief Executive Officer, Marla Hale, Chief Financial Officer. I did not move. The air in my 30-floor office suddenly vanished, replaced by the smell of a damp house, of mildewed drywall, of sour milk and the stale, desperate taste of day-old bread. I felt the cold of the fog from the old quarry bus stop seep into my bones. My hand, resting on the report, was perfectly still, but I could feel my pulse hammering in my wrist. A cold, hard, desperate rhythm. 13, 13, 13. Under their smiling photos was their corporate slogan, a single, arrogant line. Crestline Design Consortium Speed Over All. They had built a company on the same principle they used to abandon a child. Get it done fast. Cut your losses. Move on. Do not look back. Maya was still standing there, silent. She had not moved. She saw my face. She saw how I was staring at the page. She leaned forward, glanced at the names, and her own face tightened. She knew. "Ms. Lopez," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Harper, we can withdraw. I can find a reason, a scheduling conflict, a supply chain review. No one would question it." I raised my eyes from the page and looked at her. I saw the genuine concern in her face, the offer of a clean, safe escape. I closed the file. The sound was a soft, final thud on the oak desk. "No," I said. My voice was even, cold. "I am not letting the past hold the steering wheel. This is not the past. This is a competitor, a weak competitor. Their entire philosophy is flawed." I stood up. The ghost of the 13-year-old girl evaporated. The CEO was back. "Get the senior engineering and community teams in the war room in 5 minutes," I said, "and get me a pot of black coffee." "Yes, Ms. Lopez." The war room at Whitlock Urban Works was a windowless, whiteboard-walled core in the center of the building. It was where we went to dissect problems. My team, the young, brilliant engineers and data scientists I had hired, filed in. I stood at the head of the table. I did not show them the executive photos. I did not mention the names. I projected the Crestline slogan onto the main screen. "Speed over all," I said. "This is our competitor. This is their entire strategy. They will promise this city in 4 years. They will cut every corner. They will use standard, cheap concrete. They will ignore soil degradation. They will use internal data. They will grade their own homework. And they will present a budget that is a fantasy, built on ignoring the long-term costs. We are not going to compete with them. We are going to expose them. We are going to build a case so overwhelmingly, verifiably superior that the commission will see their bid for what it is, a cheap knockoff. The energy in the room shifted. It became electric. Here is how we win, I said, turning to the boards. 1 data, 2 community, 3 total, radical transparency. We worked for 2 weeks. We did not sleep. For data, they will use standard wind models, I said. I want a full dynamic wind flow simulation of the entire coastline, showing how our proposed bladeless oscillators will perform during a 100-year storm. I want bird migration overlays. Show the commission we protect the wildlife. Their turbines will kill it. They will plan for sea level rise using the 10-year-old state minimums. I continued. We will use the 50-year projections from the German climate institutes. We will not build a static, concrete seawall that will crack. We will design a living shoreline, a multi-tiered system of native marshlands and engineered reefs that will absorb wave energy and adapt with the rising tide. It costs more. We will prove it saves billions in repairs. For community, Crestline will promise jobs. That is a cheap word. We will promise careers. I pointed to my community director. I want a signed partnership agreement with the Pacifica Community College system. We are not just hiring locals. We are funding a new 5-year certification program for green tech construction and maintenance. We will train the workforce that will build this city, and then run this city. We are not leaving when the construction is done. And housing. They will build a token low-income block, segregated, cheap. We will integrate ours. I want a 10-year blind design. The subsidized rentals and the multi-million-dollar condos will share the same sustainable architecture, the same materials, the same parks. We are building a single, unified community. Finally, transparency. This was my lesson from Jasper. Crestline will present internal analytics, I said. We will not. I am hiring Green Core Labs. They are the toughest independent auditors in the world. I am giving them full access to our books, to our material suppliers, to our engineering models. We are not just submitting our data to the commission, we are submitting Green Core's unedited, independent audit of our data. We are not just claiming to be better, we are proving it, verifiably. The night before the final presentation, I was in the main conference room, practicing. I stood under the harsh white lights, just as I had when I was preparing for the press conference after Jasper's trial. Maya was my audience, playing the role of the skeptical commission. Ms. Lopez, your life cycle cost analysis is impressive, she read from a card. But Crestline's initial build cost is nearly 30% lower. How can the state justify your expense? I did not blink. Crestline's bid is not cheaper. It is just a down payment on a disaster. Their cost ignores the $20 million a year this state will pay to repair their failing concrete. It ignores the environmental fines from their inefficient water systems. It ignores the cost of rebuilding their seawall in 15 years. Their bid is a lie, wrapped in a low number. Our bid is the true, final cost. It is an investment. Theirs is a liability. The question is not whether the state of Pacifica can afford to build our city. The question is whether it can afford to build theirs. Good, Maya said, a rare smile. No notes. I could not sleep that night. I went to the beach. The sand at Seacliff was cold under my running shoes. I looked at the black water. The memory of a small, starving girl waiting at a bus stop tried to surface. The memory of a cheap, yellow note. I ran faster. The cold air burning my lungs. I am not her. She is a monument to the past. She is a scar. But I am the architect of the future. I am not here for revenge. I am not here to settle a score. I am here to win. I am here to build. The next morning, I walked into the Pacifica Administration Center. The granite lobby was a media circus. This was the biggest contract in the state's history. The air crackled. My team, my young, brilliant team, flanked me. We were a unit. We were the future. And then I saw them. Across the atrium, standing by the press check-in, surrounded by a phalanx of men in shiny, ill-fitting suits. Victor and Marla Hale. They looked just like their photos. Expensive, polished, silver. They were laughing with a state senator. It was a rehearsed, empty sound. I stopped. My team stopped with me. Victor turned his head, his practiced smile still in place, scanning the room. His eyes met mine. The smile did not just fade, it shattered. He froze, for one long, solid second. The mask of the successful CEO dissolved. I saw the man who had driven away from a damp house in Redwood Harbor. He knew me. He knew who I was, and he knew why I was here. Marla. Sensing the sudden tension, turned to him. She saw his face, the blood draining from it. She followed his gaze. She looked at me. She did not freeze. She did not gasp. She did what she had always done. She looked away. She looked down at the floor, at her expensive shoes, at the briefing notes in her hand. She broke eye contact, a physical admission of cowardice. I held Victor's gaze for another second. I did not smile. I did not show anger. I did not show pain. I showed him nothing. Then I turned my back on them and walked toward the presentation hall. I did not look back. The chamber was built to intimidate. It was all granite, dark wood, and recessed lighting. A secular cathedral dedicated to the power of the state. At the front, raised on a dais, sat the 5 members of the Montera Eco City Commission. They were not politicians. They were engineers, urban planners, and a formidable former environmental judge who served as chair. The room was packed. The press corps was a restless animal in the back rows. My team and I sat in the front row. To the left, across the aisle, I could feel the presence of the Crestline delegation. I felt Victor's eyes on the back of my head. I did not turn. "We will begin," the chair announced, her voice amplified by the room's acoustics. First, the presentation from Whitlock Urban Works. My team and I moved to the stage. We were a quiet, efficient unit. I stood at the podium. My heart was a steady, measured drum. This was not a performance. This was a presentation of facts. "Good morning. Members of the commission," I began, my voice clear and even. "My name is Harper Lopez, CEO of Whitlock Urban Works. We are here not to sell you a dream, but to present a viable, verified, and future-proofed reality." I clicked to the first slide. It was not a rendering. It was a data schematic. The Montera Eco-City cannot just be green. It must be regenerative. We do not propose a city that uses power. We propose a city that is the power plant. My engineering lead took over. His voice sharp. He detailed our energy grid 100% renewable, a mix of integrated, high-transmission solar roofing and bladeless, vertical-axis wind oscillators designed to capture the specific coastal shear. Next, our water systems. I took the podium again. Crestline will propose efficiency. We propose elimination. Our plan is for a zero-discharge, closed-loop water system. Every drop of gray water from the residential sectors is filtered through engineered, native species wetlands, which also serve as community parks. That water is then cycled back, clean, into the city's irrigation and industrial systems. No waste, no runoff. We move to materials. "Our concrete," I said, pointing to a cross-section schematic, "is made with industrial fly ash and slag. It is not just low carbon, it is carbon sequestering. Every square foot of this city will be actively removing pollution from the air." Then came the centerpiece. I projected the 25-year life cycle cost analysis. It was a graph showing 2 lines. Our competitor will show you a low initial price. We are showing you the true cost. My line, the Whitlock line, started high. It represented our superior materials, our advanced systems, our investment in the local workforce. But after year 3, our operational and maintenance costs flatlined, dropping to near zero. The second line on the graph was a dotted red one. "This," I said, "is the speed overall model, a low initial build, followed by a catastrophic, compounding climb in maintenance. Their cheap concrete will crack from the saline air in 10 years, Their inefficient turbines will need replacing in 12. Their budget bid is not a savings. It is a multi-billion-dollar debt you are leaving to your children. The commission members were not just watching. They were leaning forward. They were nodding. They were following the math. I clicked to my final slide. It was simple. It was just a logo. You do not have to take our word for it. The logo was for Greencore Labs. We have submitted, as part of our final bid, a 500-page independent audit from Greencore. They are the most ruthless, respected verifiers in the world. They had full access to our suppliers, our models, and our financials. Every number I have shown you today has been confirmed. Our competitor's bid contains data that is self-audited. We chose to submit to the highest possible standard. We chose to prove it. I stepped away from the podium. I looked at the 5 faces on the dais. My uncle, Graham Whitlock, founded our company on a simple principle, I said, my voice softening just a fraction, the only moment of emotion I allowed. He said, "We do not just build houses, we build homes, and we build lives. Our proposal is not just about building a city, it is about building a future. Thank you." The room was silent. We packed our laptops and returned to our seats. As we passed the Crestline team, I did not look at them. Victor Hale strode to the podium. He was a salesman. He smiled, a wide, practiced, confident smile. "Good morning," he boomed, his voice unnaturally loud. "I am Victor Hale, and I am here to tell you that the future does not have to be complicated. It does not have to be expensive." His first slide was a burst of color. It was a digital fly-through of a city that looked like a video game. People clinked wine glasses on balconies. Crestline delivers our slogan is speed over all because we believe in action. We are not academics. We are builders. He moved fast. He promised the entire city, turnkey, in just 48 months. He highlighted their price tag, flashing it in enormous, bright red numbers. It was, as I had predicted, almost 30% lower than ours. He glided over the technical details. We use a proprietary, high-speed composite. Our energy solution is efficient and streamlined. Our data is the result of our best-in-class internal analysis. It was a performance. It was all sizzle. It was all flash. And I could see the commission's faces grow cold. The presentation ended with another rendering of laughing, beautiful people. Victor smiled, holding his hands out wide. "The future, fast, affordable, today, thank you." He remained at the podium for the question and answer session. The chair leaned into her microphone. "Mr. Hale, your cost projections are aggressive." "We are an agile company, Madam Chair," Victor said, his smile unwavering. "So agile," she countered, "that you seem to have skipped third-party verification for every single one of your material durability and energy efficiency claims. Your entire bid is sourced to internal data. Can you explain why the state should invest multiple billions of dollars based on you, assuring us that your numbers are correct?" The smile flickered. It was the first, tiny crack in the facade. "Well, our proprietary methods are, of course, a trade secret," Victor began. "We are not asking for your trade secrets, Mr. Hale. We are asking who verified your math." "Our internal auditing team is the best in the business," he said, puffing his chest. "So, no one," the chair stated. It was not a question. It was a verdict. Another commissioner, the engineer, jumped in. "On page 240, your sea level rise projections, you are using the state minimums from a decade ago. We all know those are obsolete. Are you unaware of the new climate modeling?" Victor looked lost. He glanced back at his team. He looked at Marla Hale, the CFO, stood up. She looked flustered, her hands visibly trembling as she shuffled papers. Our models," she stammered, her voice thin. "Our models are based on the allocated budget. We believe they are sufficient." "Sufficient, Ms. Hale," the engineer cut in. his voice dripping with contempt. "The ocean does not care about your budget. You are proposing a concrete seawall that will be underwater in 20 years. This was not a QA. This was a dissection. It was brutal. And in the back of the room, the whispers began. The press, sensing the disaster, were texting furiously. A local reporter who had covered Graham's career, who had covered Jasper's trial, put it together. I could not hear the words, but I could feel the vibration of the realization spreading through the room. Lopez. Hale. Is that Victor Hale, Graham Whitlock's brother? Wait, that's his daughter, his abandoned daughter. My phone, on the table in front of me, began to vibrate silently, the screen lighting up with notifications. I did not move. I kept my face a perfect mask of neutral, professional interest. I was merely an observer. Inside, my heart was hammering, not with fear, with something else. The cold, steady pulse of the 13-year-old girl in the fog. But this time, she was not the one who was cold and alone. They were failing. They were being exposed, piece by piece, in a sterile room, under harsh lights, by their own incompetence. Their cheap note, their quick escape, had finally caught up to them. The siege lasted for 2 agonizing hours. Victor's salesman composure melted. Marla had stopped trying to answer. They were exposed. They had built their entire company on a lie, on a foundation of speed overall, and it was crumbling under the first application of serious pressure. Finally, the chair had enough. "Thank you. Crestline, the commission has a great deal to consider." She stood, a clear dismissal. "A final decision will be announced at the public hearing, 1 week from today." The room erupted. The press swarmed the stage. But not for me. They rushed past me, a wave of microphones and cameras, engulfing Victor and Marla. "Mr. Hale, why is your data unverified?" "Ms. Hale, is it true? Your competitor is your daughter?" "Mrs. Hale, did you abandon Harper Lopez in Redwood Harbor?" My team and I stood. We packed our laptops. We moved as a single, silent unit toward the exit. Through the chaos, I saw him, Victor. He was trapped in a cage of his own making, the flashing lights of the cameras reflecting off the panic and sweat on his face. His polished mask was gone. He looked desperate. He looked, for the first time, old. He turned his head, his eyes frantic, and he found me. He locked his gaze on mine, over the shoulders of the shouting reporters. It was not a look of anger. It was an appeal, a desperate, silent plea from the man who shared my blood. "Help me. Stop this. Say something. Family." I looked straight through him. I did not slow my stride. I did not blink. He was a stranger. He was a competitor who had just lost. I walked past him, my team at my side. We reached the bank of elevators. The silver doors opened. We stepped inside. As the doors slid shut, I caught my reflection in the polished steel. My hair was perfect. My suit was sharp. My eyes were clear and cold. I was not the child on the curb. I was not the girl by the refrigerator. I was the woman who had just presented the verifiable truth. The doors closed, sealing me in, sealing them out. My phone was vibrating so hard it was buzzing on the steel railing. The whole city was talking. The hashtag #MonterraBid was now trending with a new, far more brutal one. The elevator doors slid shut with a pneumatic hiss, and the chaos of the press corps vanished. But the silence inside the steel cab was louder. My phone was not vibrating. It was convulsing against the railing. A frantic, trapped bird. By the time I reached the ground floor lobby, the story was not just breaking. It was the only story in the state. It had taken less than an hour. The disaster of the Crestline presentation was the spark. But someone had been waiting with a barrel of gasoline. An anonymous, verified email was sent from a burner account named Crestline Truth to the chief investigative reporter at the Monterra Ledger. It was not a rumor. It was a package. It contained a scanned copy of a separation agreement for a former Crestline employee, dated 15 years prior. It included a non-disclosure agreement and, most damningly, a family relocation bonus paid out to Victor and Marla Hale. The address listed for the employee's previous assignment, Redwood Harbor, the reporter, the same one who had covered Jasper's trial and knew my history with Graham, did not need a confirmation. He had the paper trail. The Montera Ledger digital edition dropped at 8 p.m. that night. I was in my apartment, staring at the lights of the bay, when Maya texted me the link. The headline was a digital guillotine. The Hale family's foundation was success traded for a child. They juxtaposed two images. On the left, the polished, silver-haired corporate headshots of Victor and Marla Hale. On the right, a bleak, grainy photograph of the crumbling old quarry bus stop. The fog thick, the sign barely legible. The article was brutal. It laid out the timeline, the relocation bonus, the new life, the abandoned child. It reprinted the key line from the Crestline presentation, speed over all. The public reaction was not just anger, it was a visceral, binary judgment. The complex, boring details of concrete tensile strength and carbon data were instantly fused with the simple, brutal story of the empty refrigerator and the note. They were liars. They had lied about everything. By 9 a.m. the next morning, the financial contagion began. Crestline's primary suppliers, the ones providing their cheap, fast-build materials, began issuing public statements. They were pausing negotiations and reviewing their partnerships pending the outcome of the bid. They were not concerned with morality. They were terrified of the brand contamination. My office became a fortress. My communications director looked pale. "Harper, we have over 200 media requests in the last 3 hours. The national morning shows are offering to fly crews out. Oprah's office called. They all want your story." I looked at her, my resolve cold and absolute. "We are not giving them one." I instructed her to issue a single, unified statement. It was posted to the Whitlock Urban Works corporate site and all social channels. It was exactly 45 words long. Whitlock Urban Works is focused on the Montera Echo City bid. We stand by our independently verified data. We are committed to delivering a project built on integrity, transparency, and sustainable truth. That was all. I did not have to confirm the past. The world was screaming it for me. I did not have to attack my competitors. They were self-destructing. My professional silence on the personal matter was interpreted as strength. I was the CEO, focused on the work. While they were consumed by the firestorm of their own creation, the real damage, however, was not on social media. It was in the stock market. The Speed Overall business model was built on high-risk leverage. It needed constant forward momentum. The second it stopped, it collapsed. 2 days after the presentation, a major institutional equity fund, one of Crestline's seed investors, publicly announced it was divesting its entire 10% stake. The press release was a masterpiece of corporate assassination. It cited new information regarding serious concerns over corporate governance and a lack of verifiable third-party data auditing. The message was clear. The abandonment story was the why. The fake data was the how. Investors, who had ignored the boring technical data a week ago, were now demanding answers. Why was all the data self-audited? Where were the independent certifications? The Commission, moving to protect itself from the political fallout, issued a public directive. Both Whitlock and Crestline were required to submit supplemental documentation, including all third-party sustainable certifications. Within 24 hours, it was a test, a public execution disguised as a paperwork request. My team was ready. We had been ready for months. Within 3 hours, we had delivered 12 bound volumes of notarized, cross-referenced data, including the full, unedited Green Core Labs audit, to the Commission's mild office. Crestline delivered nothing. The rumors began to fly. Marla Hale had vanished. She had not been seen in public since she fled the presentation hall. A spokesperson claimed she was on a pre-scheduled medical leave. My internal analysts, however, monitoring their credit lines, painted a different picture. Their primary lender, spooked by the media storm and the investor sell-off, had called in their high-risk loans. Crestline was not just in trouble, it was insolvent. Victor Hale, desperate and alone, did the only thing he could. He called a press conference. He stood on the steps of the Crestline headquarters, a building I noted already had a "for lease" sign posted on its upper floors. He looked terrible. He was unshaven, his expensive suit rumpled, the practiced salesman's smile gone, replaced by a haggard, hunted look. "This is a private matter," he pleaded, his voice hoarse. A family tragedy. From many years ago, it has nothing to do with our ability to deliver this project." The press, who had adored him a week ago, turned. The Ledger reporter shouted the first question. "Mr. Hale, if the commission cannot trust you to tell the truth about your own daughter, why should they trust your self-audited data on concrete durability?" He had no answer. He just stared, trapped in the flashing lights. He had built his life on a quick escape, and now he was cornered, with no exit. The final validation came not from the banks, but from the community. The Pacifica Environmental Coalition, the Montara Native Plant Society, and the Coastal Waterkeepers all issued public endorsements, one after another. They did not endorse me because of my past. They endorsed me because of my plan. Whitlock's proposal for a living shoreline and integrated native species habitat is the only serious, future-proofed plan. The coalition director wrote, "Crestline's bid is a 20th century model with a green sticker on it. We had won. The data had won. The community had won. I was in my office on Friday afternoon. The final commission hearing, the one to formally announce the winner, was scheduled for the following Tuesday. We were already preparing the transition documents." Maya buzzed my desk. "Harper, you need to see this. Now." I walked to her desk. She had an email open on her screen. It was from the same anonymous burner account. "Crestline Truth." The subject line was simple. "They are more crooked than you know." The body of the email was short. I was the accountant. Victor and Marla did not just plan to win with a low bid. They had a backup. They were terrified of your independent audit because they knew they would fail, so they planned to cheat. Attached was a single, password-protected file. The password, the sender noted, was Redwood 95. My stomach turned to ice. Maya typed it in. The file opened. It was not a spreadsheet. It was a scanned copy of a private ledger, a schedule of payments, a price list for bribes. It listed 2 mid-level city planning engineers, the very men responsible for verifying preliminary site assessments and soil data. It showed a schedule of offshore wire transfers, coded as consulting fees, set to be paid out after Crestline was awarded the contract. It was not just a plan. It was a receipt. They had already paid the down payment. They were planning to buy the approvals they could not possibly earn. The anonymous sender had added one last line. "This is for you. Stay quiet. Let them crash. Do not use this. It will bring too much heat on the whole project. Just take the win." The sender wanted me to bury it, to take the clean victory and protect the city from the scandal of a tainted bid process. I looked at the bribe schedule. I looked at Maya. This was the final test. This was the moment Graham had trained me for. Stand tall when no one is watching. Staying quiet was the easy move. It was the speed overall move. It was what Victor and Marla would have done. I picked up my phone. I did not call my lawyer. I did not call my PR team. I dialed the main number for the State District Attorney's Office, Financial Crimes Division. "My name is Harper Lopez, CEO of Whitlock Urban Works," I said, my voice calm and low. "I am in possession of direct evidence of criminal bribery and conspiracy to defraud related to the Montara Echo City bid." I forwarded the entire unedited email chain, the encrypted file, and the password. I included the email's digital headers, which my team had already traced. I sent a copy, marked Confidential, Tainted Bid Protocol, directly to the private email of the commission chair. I did not just report the crime. I submitted the digitally signed, verified proof. I hung up the phone. The final hearing was in 4 days. The trap was set. The weekend was the longest 72 hours of my life. The city was a pressure cooker. Every news channel, every blog, Every radio talk show was debating the Montera bid. They were not debating concrete. They were debating morality. They were telling my story, or their version of it. I stayed silent. I instructed my entire company to stay silent. Our statement stood. Our data stood. The district attorney's office had been silent. The commission had been silent. It was Monday morning, 24 hours until the final announcement. The air in my office on the 30th floor was so still it felt crystalline. I was reviewing the preliminary schematics for the water reclamation system. My mind focused. When Maya's voice came over the intercom, it was flat. But I knew her. I could hear the tension beneath it. Ms. Lopez, I have Mr. Victor and Mrs. Marla Hale on line 1. They are not at their office. They are in the lobby. They are asking to see you. Privately. The air left my lungs. It was not a request. It was a surrender. No press, I asked. None. They seem alone, Maya said. I looked out at the bay. The water was gray, the sky low. Send them up. Give me 5 minutes. Then bring them in. I did not move from my desk. I did not prepare a speech. I did not review my notes. I just stood, watching the door, and waited. Maya opened the door. They did not walk in. They shuffled. The outline, the memory I had of them from the presentation, was of 2 polished, silver, arrogant executives. The people who entered my office were strangers. They were old. The arrogance was gone, sandblasted away by the media storm of the last week. Their expensive, tailored suits hung on them, as if their bodies had shrunk. Victor's face was gray and stubbled. The confident salesman's tan replaced by a sick pallor. Marla was leaning on his arm, not for support, but as if they were 2 shipwreck survivors, lashed together. Her eyes, the same eyes that had avoided mine in the atrium, were now red-rimmed, swollen, and fixed on the floor. They stopped in the middle of my office, 10 feet from my desk. They were dwarfed by the glass walls, the high ceiling, the sheer, cold volume of my success. The silence was absolute, broken only by the sound of the wind whistling almost imperceptibly against the high-performance glass. Marla was the one who spoke first. Her voice a dry, cracked whisper. Harper. She could not continue. She put a trembling hand to her mouth. Victor tightened his grip on her arm. He looked at me, and his eyes, the eyes of my father, were defeated. All the fire, the greed, the salesmanship, it was all gone. There was only exhaustion. He began. His voice was thick. He swallowed, a painful bobbing motion in his throat. We apologize. The 2 words fell into the vast, silent room. They were heavy, ugly, and useless. They were stones dropped into a canyon. I heard them fall, but I felt no impact. I said nothing. I did not nod. I did not offer them a seat. I did not offer them comfort. I just stood, my hands resting lightly on my desk, and I let them stand in the sterile air, with their dead offering. Victor, mistaking my silence for a different kind of power, stumbled on. This was the speech they had rehearsed. This was the one they had told themselves for 15 years. We were young, he said, his voice gaining a desperate, pleading momentum. We had nothing. You do not know what it was like, Redwood Harbor. It was a trap. We were poor. The kind of poor that gets in your bones. Marla, finding her voice, chimed in, her gaze still on the carpet. We just wanted a new start. We saw a chance. Our one chance. And we had to take it. We had to run. We truly thought. She looked up, her eyes swimming. We thought we were leaving you to a better future, that someone, that the system, would find you, that it would be better than us. The lie, the old, miserable, self-serving lie, the excuse that had let them sleep at night for 15 years. My face remained unchanged. I did not raise my voice. I did not cry. The 13-year-old girl inside me was cold and quiet, but she was not in control. The CEO was... I have heard it, I said. My voice was so calm, so flat. It startled them. It was not the voice of a wounded daughter. It was the voice of an auditor who had just found a fatal error in the books. "The words you are using are incorrect," I continued, stepping slowly from behind my desk. I was not attacking. I was clarifying. "You did not leave me to a better future. You left me in a damp house with a half carton of sour milk and the heel of a loaf of bread. You left me to wash my clothes in a cold basin. You left me at a bus stop in the fog, with 82 cents in my pocket. You did not leave. You abandoned. Let us be precise." Marla let out a small, strangled sob. "Harper, please, we made a mistake. A terrible—" "A mistake," I repeated, "is a clerical error. It is a rounding error in a budget. What you did was a decision, a deliberate choice. You built your new life, your entire company. On that first act of speed overall, you cut your losses. I was the loss." I was standing in front of them now, close enough to smell the faint, sour scent of their fear. "I am not her," I said, my voice quiet, but carrying the weight of the steel in the walls. "You are not here to speak to that girl. She is not here. You are here, in my office, as the failing principals of Crestline Design Consortium, and as the CEO of Whitlock Urban Works. I am telling you that your story, your justification, it is insufficient." Marla reached out a trembling hand, not to touch me, but as if to ward off the words. "What do you want?" she whispered. Do you want forgiveness? We will beg. We will do anything." I almost laughed. It was not a sound of humor. It was a cold release of pressure. "Forgiveness. That is a private matter, and we have no private relationship. We are competitors, and you have lost." They looked confused. This was not the script. This was not the emotional, tearful reunion they had, perhaps, in some small, selfish part of their minds, hoped for. They began to turn. Defeated, they had played their last card, and it was useless. "One more thing," I said. I walked back to my desk. I did not pick up the bribery file. I picked up a simple, bound document, the one we had submitted to the commission. "This is the Montera Eco-City Contractors Code of Conduct," I said, my voice all business. "I am sure you received a copy, but I am not certain you read it." I held it out to Victor. His hand, shaking, took it. "Page 4, I said, as if correcting an apprentice. "Section B. All submitted data must be independently verified by an approved third party. Page 6, Section D. All community partnerships must be transparent. Page 9, Section F. Zero tolerance for graft, bribery, or undue influence." I tapped the page in his hand. "These are the rules. This is the truth. This is what you failed. This is why you are ruined. It has nothing to do with Redwood Harbor. It has to do with your refusal to do the work, your refusal to build something honest. You took the shortcut, just as you always have." I walked past them and opened the heavy oak door to my office. "If you have anything left to say, any confession, any apology, you can say it to the commission tomorrow, at the public hearing. That is the only forum that matters now. That is the only truth we all need." They moved past me. Two gray ghosts in a sunless room. Victor stopped in the doorway. He looked back at me, his face a ruin of regret. He opened his mouth. The word formed on his lips. "Daughter." I cut him off. My voice was not cruel. It was not angry. It was just final. "Goodbye, Mrs. Marla. Goodbye, Mr. Victor." I closed the door. The sound of the high-performance latch clicking into place was the loudest sound I had ever heard. I did not move. I leaned my back against the solid, 3-inch thick wood of the door. I closed my eyes. I did not collapse. I did not cry. I just breathed. I took one, deep, shuddering breath. I felt the tension of 15 years, the cold of the bus stop, the burn of the airbag, the shame of the corner store. I felt it all gather, and then, with that one exhale, it did not leave me. It just settled. It clicked into place, like the final girder in a bridge. It was no longer a weight. It was just my foundation. I stood there for 3 seconds, then I opened my eyes. I straightened my suit jacket. I walked out of my office, past Maya, who was wisely looking at her keyboard. I did not go to the elevator. I walked directly to the war room. My team was inside, running last-minute projections for the transition. They looked up, their faces tight with anxiety. "It is done," I said. They relaxed. Just a fraction. "Prepare the final press release," I ordered, my voice sharp and back to work. "I want the contractor onboarding packets ready to be messengered to the unions by noon tomorrow. We are moving. We are not waiting." My new head of logistics, the data scientist, looked up from her screen. "Harper, what if the DA's investigation, the bribery evidence, what if it causes the commission to pause the entire project?" I looked at her, and I felt the first cold shadow of a smile. "It will not," I said. "They will not punish the one clean bidder. We gave them the truth. We won this on engineering. We won this on law. And we won this because we knew, crucially, when to be silent." I tapped the main schematic of the new city. "We are ready. Let's go build a city." The Montera Crown Convention Center was lit for television. The main hall was packed, standing room only. In the front rows sat the entire State Infrastructure Committee, the governor's aides, and the unified, ravenous body of the press. This was not just a bid announcement. It was public theater. My team and I sat on the left, across the aisle. 2 seats were empty in the Crestline delegation, but Victor and Marla Hale were present. They sat side by side, rigid, 2 statues carved from ice. They had been compelled to attend. The commission chair, the former judge, walked to the podium. The room fell into a heavy, suffocating silence. "We are here," she began, her voice crisp and amplified, "to announce the final awarding of the multi-billion-dollar Montera Eco-City contract. This commission has reviewed 2 vastly different proposals, thousands of pages of data, and hundreds of hours of testimony. The decision was not difficult. It was, in the end, self-evident." I could hear the shudder of a dozen cameras. I could feel Victor's eyes on me. I kept my gaze fixed on the chair. One bid was built on unverified, self-audited claims, obsolete climate data, and a disregard for long-term community cost. The other, she paused, was a masterpiece of verified, independently audited data, a revolutionary approach to regenerative sustainability, and a deep, contractual commitment to the local community. "Therefore," she said, her voice rising with finality, "the Commission hereby awards the Montera Eco-City contract in its entirety to Whitlock Urban Works." The room exploded. Applause thundered against the walls. My team, my young, brilliant, exhausted team, grabbed each other, some crying, some shouting. I stood, clapping politely, a single, deep breath filling my lungs. The live feed director knew his job. The cameras, which had been on me, immediately swung across the aisle. The feed was projected onto the massive screens flanking the stage. Victor and Marla Hale. They were frozen. Their practiced, boardroom smiles were still on their faces. But the muscle memory had failed. The smiles were ghastly, stiff, cracking masks of denial, stretched over faces that were chalk white. Marla was staring at nothing, her eyes wide, unblinking. Victor looked like he had been struck by lightning. "We invite Ms. Lopez to the stage to sign the preliminary project authorization," the chair announced. I walked the steps. The official documents were laid out on the antique table. A staffer offered me a generic, plastic-capped pen. I shook my head politely and reached into the inner pocket of my suit jacket. I pulled out a pen. It was heavy, silver, and worn smooth in places. It was the pen Graham had used to sign the contracts for his first stone bridges. His name, G. Whitlock, was engraved on the side. I uncapped it. I was about to touch the nib to the signature line. "Before Ms. Lopez signs," A new voice cut through the applause. The State District Attorney's Office has a brief statement. The room did not just quiet down, it died. Every person froze. A man I did not recognize, wearing a severe, dark suit, stepped to a side podium. "Good morning," he said, his voice void of all emotion. "As of 6 a.m. this morning, my office, in conjunction with the State Comptroller, has opened a formal criminal investigation into conspiracy to defraud the state of Pacifica, wire fraud, and bribery related to this bidding process." A collective gasp sucked the air from the room. "Our investigation," the DA continued, his eyes scanning the press, "is focused on a number of contractors, primarily Crestline Design Consortium." Marla Hale made a sound, a small, strangled animal noise. The DA motioned to the main screen. The image of Crestline's frozen faces was replaced by something else. It was my evidence. It was the Crestline Truth email. It was the scanned copy of the bribe ledger, the price list. It was the schedule of offshore wire transfers. The district attorney's office had, as I requested, redacted the names of the low-level employees and the anonymous sender. This was not a media smear. This was a surgical, legal execution. "We have evidence," the DA said, his voice a hammer, "of a systematic plan to falsify sustainability data, and failing that, to bribe city officials to approve those falsified documents. This investigation is active and ongoing." He stepped back. The chairwoman stepped forward, her face a mask of thunderous, righteous anger. "In light of this information," she announced, "the Commission is enacting an emergency ethics ordinance, effective immediately. Any contractor, or any associated primary executive, found to be under formal investigation for financial crimes related to a state bid, is hereby barred from participating in any and all projects within the state of Pacifica. This ban is effective for a minimum of 5 years. It was a death sentence, but the cascade was not finished. A third person stood up from the front row, the representative from the Green Infrastructure Fund, the multi-billion-dollar private equity group that had backed Crestline's initial capital. "Given the investigation into Crestline," the representative said, his voice amplified by a microphone passed to him by an aide, "and their clear failure to meet the ethical governance standards required by our charter, the fund is formally rescinding its line of credit. That preferred credit line is hereby transferred, in its entirety, to the winning bidder, Whitlock Urban Works, whose verified, transparent, and ethical proposal is a model for the future." It was over. In the span of 10 minutes, they had lost the contract. They were under criminal investigation. They were banned from doing business in the state, and they were bankrupt. Every camera, every microphone, every eye in the room turned to me. I was still standing at the signing table, Graham's pen in my hand. I walked to the main podium. I did not have a speech. I did not need one. I leaned into the microphone. The only sound was the clicking of 100 cameras. "We did not win today because of a family story," I said, my voice clear and cold, filling the hall. "We won because of standards. We won because of independently verified data. We won because we chose to build a sustainable future, not a cheap one." I looked across the room, my gaze finding Victor. He was staring at me, his face utterly broken. The ghost of a man. "Today," I said, my voice dropping, low and precise, "I am taking back everything they ever wanted, not with revenge, but with results, by doing the work, and by doing it right, from the very beginning." The room erupted. It was not applause. It was a chaotic storm of light and sound. I saw Victor. He lurched to his feet. He took one step into the aisle, his hand half raised, his mouth open, not in anger, but in a final, broken, desperate reflex. He was not trying to attack me. He was trying to reach me. He never made it. 2 event security officers, moving with polite, practiced efficiency, stepped in front of him. They did not touch him. They were just a polite, immovable wall. "Sir," one of them murmured, just loud enough for the aisle microphone to catch, "this area is for participants only. Please, allow us to show you the exit." He did not resist. He just deflated. The last of his life's energy left him. They guided him, and a catatonic Marla, out a side door, away from the cameras, away from the future. I turned back to the table. The cameras were blinding me. I could not see the crowd. I could only see the contract. I lowered the pen, the silver nib, the one Graham had used, touched the paper. I signed my name, Harper Lopez. The chairwoman lifted the heavy embossed state seal. She pressed it onto the paper next to my signature. The sound was not loud. It was a heavy, final, definitive thud. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Let me know what you thought in the comments, and tell me where in the world you are listening from today so we can connect. Please subscribe to Maya Revenge Stories and like this video. And if you want more stories like this one to be heard, please support us by hitting that hype button.